Welcome to the What's New in Tracker for ArcGIS session. My name is Jeff Shaner, and I'm the product lead for our Field Apps team out of Redlands, California. Today we're going to talk about a relatively new product from Esri called Tracker for ArcGIS. But before we start, I wanted to put Tracker in context of our greater strategy for field operations. And when we think about the development of apps at Esri, what we do is we step back and we look at what are the key activities that our customers are engaged in when they go to conduct their field work. And you can see those activities listed here. They need to be able to plan for the work that they need to accomplish in the field. They need to be able to get to the field location, the work location, in the most efficient manner, using voice guidance and turn-by-turn directions. They need to use maps to gain context or understanding, having all the latest information available to them. They need to capture new information in the field, whether that be observations about an event that's going on, whether that be the accurate collection of asset information, or whether that be capturing an inspection of an existing asset during the maintenance life cycle of it. Throughout that process, they need to be able to monitor the work that's going on. They need to be able to monitor where their people are and also where they've gone, so they can effectively coordinate those activities between the office and the field. And it's in that monitor phase that we envisioned Tracker and brought it to market. So Tracker for ArcGIS is, as I mentioned already, a new solution from Esri that lets you record and share your location within your organization so that everyone knows where you are and where you've been, and all of that information is stored inside of your GIS so that you can use all the wonderful spatial analytics capabilities to detect patterns and bring that information forward for a variety of different workflows. Now, when we were envisioning Tracker for ArcGIS, we walked through a number of use cases for it, and I wanted to do that with you here as well. So one of the key ways that Tracker for ArcGIS is being utilized today is to improve situational awareness during events. We can see where responders are when they're needed, like security staff, like medical staff, or event staff. That information about their last known location is being broadcast through the Tracker mobile application and updated frequently to the server where you can have a real-time dashboard that's showing the updated location of every person. And that really helps you in an emergency response context when you have medical or security staff that need to be dispatched based upon their location to an incident that's occurring. Also key to the Tracker solution is that as one of those responders, I need to be able to run this Tracker application on my smartphone device passively in the background, and it needs to run for a full shift. That could be a 10 to 12 hour shift without draining the battery life. And I'll go into some details a little bit later on about how we do that. So improving situational awareness in real time is a key driving use case for Tracker for ArcGIS. And we have a number of customers that are using it today, and you can see through these photos some key areas where that's actually taken place. Another way you can use it is for near real-time assessments, whether that be a flooding event, perhaps a wildfire, or search and rescue activity. The interesting thing here is that a lot of those workflows today are handled through separate units, like a Garmin handheld. And in the context of a wildfire event, for example, those assessors that are doing, let's say, damage assessment reports are carrying along these separate handheld units. They finish their day, they get back to the operations center, they hand over the Garmin unit. Someone has to then offload all of the track data that's on it, upload it into the GIS, and then start to assess the coverage that's happened. And that's cumbersome. It takes a lot of time. That information is needed to ensure that areas were properly covered. You don't have to go back and visit areas again. The tracker advantage to this is that location tracks work whether you're connected or disconnected. And when you do gain connectivity, they're synced back automatically for you. So those operations supervisors can see in near real time as information is collected and where those assessors have gone. It's all managed in a single service for them automatically. There's no data massaging where you have to bring that information forward. And those tracks can be displayed in a lot of different applications, whether it be apps, in the operations center in a dashboard environment, or whether it be on a mobile device, say with Explorer or a custom application, even a web application that was built for a mobile device. And no separate GPS receiver or handheld is actually required to do it. So one less thing for that responder to carry while they're in the field. Another way that we see tracker being used is for proof of work. So if your organization is perhaps doing a gas leak survey, or they're doing some form of inspection activity that's regulated, and they need to be able to account for where their staff has been, perhaps for liability purposes, perhaps also to do some analytics on work efficiency, maybe understand what types of work take longer to complete than others. By passively running a location tracking solution on their mobile device, you have all that log of data. And you know who was actually where, because Tracker actually leverages the editor tracking capabilities of a feature service to pull that off. And it records the location timestamp of when a position was captured, as well as a date timestamp of when the information was stored in the database. So you always have that to go back from so that you can do that analytics if you'd like. One last use case that I wanted to talk about that is pretty common is the level of surface commitments that you may have with contractors. So you may have this perception of the amount of work that is being accomplished or regions traveled by your contractors, yet you don't really have a means to quantify it. Some try to use AVL systems for that, but honestly, you don't have the ownership of that content to really make that available and accessible. And quite often those AVL systems can be black boxes and you don't have all that data stored. Using Tracker, that information can be installed on a contractor's device. It can be turned on when they're working for you, turned off when they're not working for you. Those tracks are stored in your organization, and then you can use that information to turn perception into reality. So hopefully that, if you're not using Tracker today, that gives you a few examples of how it can be utilized, perhaps even in your own organization. So what is it? Let's talk about the key components of Tracker. Well, we do have a mobile application that's available today on iOS and Android devices. It's a very simple, schedule-driven experience that's designed to be optimized for low battery consumption, supports connected and disconnected use. It does require a premium add-on license, but it works with any user type, including a viewer user type. So you could purchase the viewer user type and add the premium license for the Tracker use and start tracking locations. There's also a Track Viewer web app. Its primary purpose is for you to create views that can securely share information about the location tracks of members within your organization. It uses ownership-based access control and feature service views to do that. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail. It also has a visual component, so you can dig in and interrogate that track data if you'd like. The most common use of it, though, is either to take the location, last known location layer or the tracks layer and throw it into a dashboard and use that for visualization purposes, because then you can overlay other information like weather and asset data. The track viewer, from a visualization perspective, is really just about those individual tracks and digging in and understanding that in a little bit more detail. I think the biggest, most exciting thing about Tracker, though, is that both with ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise, we've really brought forward a new organizational capability. And we'll show you a little bit later how you can enable location tracking in your organization. Tracker is one app that utilizes it today. ArcGIS Indoors is another. Late this year, we'll be looking at how do we bring the tracking capabilities that are in the Tracker app, that are also in the Indoors app, down into the ArcGIS Runtime SDKs so that custom applications that you build can utilize it as well. Let's take a closer look at the mobile application first. So I've got an embedded video here that's going to show you how simple it is to get started. Once I've signed in, I can simply just flick the switch to turn tracking on or off. I can tap on my GPS location to see where I currently am. Or as you can see, there's a history of where I've gone. I can zoom in on that track data, can tap on it, and get some meaningful information out of it. Now, not only can I just visualize my current tracks, I can look at my tracks from yesterday, or perhaps the last 48 or 72 hours if I'd like as well. Something really important to note about the Tracker mobile app is that it's not using time to record tracks. It's using motion or activity to do that. So what we try to do inside of the mobile app is say, keep a granularity of every 5 meters when the activity or motion is of a state of walking. And then as you increase your speed and get to the point where the activity is saying that you're driving, capturing every 30 meters. So you have this consistent granularity or coarseness to the tracks that we capture. Now there's a separate concept of uploading those tracks as well. And really they're in two contexts. There's the last known location where you currently are, and there's also the history of where you've been. And we'll talk about those two pieces a little bit later, but we have separate upload frequencies on the two so that we can optimize when and how we're using the network chipset. And the way that we actually take advantage of location and the capabilities from your smartphone to be easy on battery life is that by using motion, we can subscribe to the motion and fitness APIs and then launch the GPS chipset, activate it when we need to, when you're actually in motion. So we're using activity detection to say, is Jeff stationary right now? If he's stationary, shut down the GPS. There's no reason to keep it alive. There's no reason to keep the network chipset alive. Let's wait until the motion and fitness APIs tell us that Jeff has changed in his activity. He's perhaps now walking or running or driving. And in that context, we'll fire back up the GPS. We'll start recording locations again. So we can really be optimal on how much battery we actually use on the device. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been able to support that 10 to 12 hours of a shift of a responder in an event. So it's proven quite effective. Now there's another aspect of the mobile device, or the mobile app, sorry, and that's your profile. And inside of the profile, you can set a schedule. The schedule will help you remember when to start and when to stop tracking. You can set which days of the week, what the start time is, what the stop time is, and you'll be notified on your device when it's time to start or stop tracking. Likewise, if you're, let's just say, a responder, you could set the coordinate format used when tapping on tracks. You probably saw that go by already. By default, we're using the settings of the map, but I could change it to USNG if that's the format that I'm communicating in, or MGRS if I'm using the military format and whatnot. I can also change the frequency at which I'm uploading last known locations, and from that profile I could tap and force that an upload happen right now if I want. Other things to note from the mobile app perspective, we've added the ability for you to visualize those tracks in other applications. So today with the Collector application or the Explorer application on iOS, if you're signed in with the same account in both Collector and Tracker, as you're seeing here, then tracks appear as this additional layer that I can turn on, and I can view my history of where I've gone. In that case of the damage assessment, that's really valuable because, you know, today you've got the separate handheld GPS receiver and you're capturing information separately, perhaps in a smartphone app. Two of them really aren't together. It's easy to get disorientated in neighborhoods where there's been a lot of activity, say in a wildfire. So you really need to know where exactly you've been, and being able to show that on the map you're using to do data collection is quite valuable. Now it also utilizes the settings that are in Tracker when you're using Collector or Explorer. So if I only want to show today's tracks, that's all that'll appear in Collector. If I want to show the last 72 hours, you know, that's what I'll show. And it works completely offline as well. The next release of Workforce will have this capability embedded within it as well. Last slide I wanted to talk about with the mobile piece is really that sign-in process. And if you use ArcGIS Enterprise with our mobile applications today, you know that perhaps probably the hardest thing to train your field workers on is how to sign in. Because first they have to enter in the URL of the portal, and it's really easy to type that wrong. So we've done a couple of things, and we're doing this across all of our mobile apps to really streamline that. We have a concept of an app link. That's what I'm showing you here. The app link is something that you can construct using an argument called the portal URL that points you to your portal. You could take that information, you can generate a QR code for it, and then with that QR code, you can use the scan code capability within the app to actually skip that whole process of having to type in the URL. It takes you right to the entry of the username and password. Okay, the one final thing to mention is that portal URL configuration, as well as the update and upload capabilities for tracks and last known locations, can be configuration keywords if you're using a mobile device management software. This screenshot here is from Mobile Iron. So it shows you if I'm creating a configuration for my field operations group, I can set the portal URL to be the name of my portal, so they don't have to type it in. That's a string value. I could set the upload last known location down to 5 seconds if I want. And I can change that update or upload of tracks to 30 seconds if I'd like to. So a lot of capabilities there if you're using a mobile device management software. And we're looking at doing much more there too, and we'd really like to hear where you'd like us to take that. I'll talk a little bit about that in the what's coming slide. Just to kind of sum up the mobile app aspects, something I didn't mention that's really important from a privacy perspective is that the mobile user is in complete control. They turn on and off tracking. They can set reminders to schedule when to turn on tracking and when to turn it off. Another point that I made earlier is about using movement, not time, to record tracks. It works completely offline. We're uploading the last known location by default every 60 seconds. You can configure that to 30 seconds through the user experience. From that MDM, you can go down to 5 seconds if you want. The track data itself uploads every 10 minutes by default. But if you are having the device plugged in and it's got more than a 20% charge, then we'll bring that down to 60 seconds. This complexity, so to speak, is really about our fine-tuning as we were doing performance testing and battery use testing, and that's the recipe that we came up with, which was most optimal. Now, you know, if you're in an event and you need those uploads to happen more frequently, feel free to go ahead and change those values, but just know it's going to have that cost in battery use. Showed you how you can use the tracks in other apps. You can streamline the enterprise setup and use your MDM. So that's kind of an overview of the mobile app. I did want to pause for a second and talk about something I had mentioned a bit earlier, which is personal privacy. So when it comes to location tracking, that's perhaps one of the first things that is brought up. But what about my privacy? I don't know. I don't want people to know where I am or where I've been. I don't want Big Brother to be in control of my location. Well, our perspective on this is that the mobile user, as I mentioned already, is in control of when to record and share tracks. And you can set as the mobile worker the schedule for when to start and stop tracking, but an administrator can't remotely control tracking. We've got some future roadmap capabilities that talk about auto starting or auto stopping of tracking, all of which though would require some notification up front or acknowledgement from the mobile worker that they are about to be tracked. So really important is that the mobile user's in control. Now, there's also the question about corporate privacy with location tracks. And with ArcGIS Enterprise, you can establish that behind your firewall, and you can use app-level VPN through an MDM to make sure that all the synchronization is happening that way. If you choose to go the enterprise route, well, you on your own are managing all aspects of the system then, right? You're managing the storage of those location tracks as well. I would encourage you to have an operating procedure within your organization where you can truncate tracks for employees that have separated with your company so that you remove any history of their location. But outside of that, I mean, with ArcGIS Enterprise, you're in complete control. With ArcGIS Enterprise, I'd encourage you to look at the trust.arcgis.com site. But ultimately, you're using Esri's SaaS environment, and the ownership of the tracks kind of falls on us. But read the trust site and understand what that means from your perspective and your organization's perspective. We do have a location privacy paper that we've been working on, and that will be coming soon to the trust site. It'll have some information and best practices if you're deploying the tracker solution or the indoor solution, and you have concerns in your organization about privacy. Okay, let's move to that next step, which is the track views themselves. Track views are a means into being able to visualize and interrogate the tracks of others. And we've got a web application called the Track Viewer that's accessible from that app switcher that you just saw inside of ArcGIS Online and Enterprise that'll launch, and you can create this track view. The track view is ultimately a feature layer view that has a definition query inside of it that consists of the mobile users and the track viewers that are a part of it. We store that item in a folder, we create a group, and we share that group inside of your organization based upon the settings for the track viewers and the mobile users. And you can see in the embedded video how I'm adding those individuals right now. For the mobile workers, what we can do is we can add them individually, as I'm doing here. You could add them from a group, or if you're also utilizing Workforce, from an existing Workforce project. And then you have the track viewers. The owner of the location tracking service is added by default, and then you can add other viewers to it. They just simply need to have a viewer user type, and then you need to, and I will show this in a bit, have granted them the view location tracks privilege in the organization. The administrator needs to do that for you, and I'll show you how that works in a second. Now, the track viewer can also be used for visualization purposes. So I can open up that view either as that administrator that's creating these track views or as the track viewer that's visualizing tracks and start to interrogate them. And there's lots of interesting things we can do here. One is that we're going to render those tracks as lines. We have a custom pop-up, so you'll see here how I can tap on a track and then start to move really quickly through the next or previous tracks that were recorded and see easily where someone has gone. There's a smart rendering capability so that we can filter out positions of poor accuracy. Here we've got one user highlighted, but we could highlight multiple users if we'd like. We can switch base maps. So if we wanted to have that imagery base map and see more detail, we can. But if you're out at a view like this, perhaps a navigation base map or street view base map is sufficient. We're using the base maps that are part of your organization. And then inside of the track viewer, there's a lot of filtering capabilities. We can filter by time. We've got some default time set up, like 8 hours or 24 hours or 72, like on the mobile device. Or you could filter by accuracy or by speed. Or finally, what you're going to see here is by type of motion, because we're recording all of that information as part of the track. So I can just look at when was Jeff driving, or when was he walking, or when was he not doing either and just he was just stationary. So all those capabilities are there inside of the track viewer if you want to take a look a little bit deeper into the individual tracks and what was recorded. But like I mentioned, most organizations are actually using the track data that we record in a dashboard for situational awareness, or for that proof of work where you want to see the breadcrumb trail or history of where someone's gone. And all of that information is actually recorded as point data that you can filter or query and do whatever you'd like with it. So let's talk a bit about the overall capability that we've added. You must be an administrator to enable location tracking. What I'm showing you in the video is how you can enable it from within ArcGIS Online. From the Organizations tab, there is the ability to click on an organization extension and enable location tracking. We'll provide you some information about what is actually being created, and then we'll enable it. Within ArcGIS Online, we have a fixed retention period for those tracks that's set to 30 days. If you're using ArcGIS Enterprise 10.7 or higher, you can set that retention period to whatever you'd like. It could be forever if you'd like. On the Enterprise case, we do require that you set up the spatiotemporal big data store, though. We're going to store these tracks inside of that data store because we anticipate a high continuous input and large volume of tracks. Now, inside of this organizational extension view, you can pause tracking if you want. And when you pause it, then we're not going to let any mobile workers upload tracks anymore. You can also disable tracking. If you disable tracking, it's not only going to disable the ability to upload tracks, but it's going to call any tracks, delete any views, and basically wipe your system, your subscription from tracks altogether. I wanted to talk a little bit about the schema itself. So actually, no, hold on a second here. I wanted to talk, before I do that, about views. So let me just run this video. Hopefully I got the right video embedded. Now, what I wanted to talk about with the view still is the need to create a custom role. You need to create a custom role because anyone that you would like to be able to see the tracks of other people need to have the view location tracks privilege. That's a content privilege that's available to even a viewer user type, as you can see here. I'm going ahead in the member roles and creating, we're calling it track viewer custom role. And then in the content privileges, scrolling down to the bottom to turn on the view location tracks privilege. And then for every member that I'd like to be able to view the tracks of other users, those are the ones that in the track view I added as track viewers. I'm going to change their role to this new custom role that I've created that gives them the privilege to view tracks. So you need to do that for all the track viewers that you have. Now, if you're going to go and, say, put this into a dashboard, make sure that either the owner of the dashboard is a user, in that case it would be a creator user, that has the privilege to view tracks. The other thing you could do as well, though, is create a new item inside of your content and embed the credentials of that user, just like you would for premium content, and then add that item to your dashboard so that that item and its layer renders using that privilege. Okay, last thing that I wanted to talk about with the capability is the feature service itself. So what we've done is we've created one location tracking feature service for your entire organization. And it's composed of two separate layers, the last known location feature layer and the tracks feature layer. If you're concerned mostly about real-time situational awareness and where someone's at, not necessarily where someone's gone, I would recommend just adding the last known location feature layer into your dashboards and then rendering that location as the location that is being updated. Set like a layer refresh interval to, 30 seconds or a minute. So you're seeing those updates frequently. In fact, a quick story on that, I actually saw a fire department use a dashboard with the last known location service or the layer in it. They put in the dashboard a visual element that let them see the last known location in a list for every responder. They sorted that list based upon location timestamp, and then they walked through that list to do their morning roll call. So they could see the person, click on the person. They saw their location on the map because it updated their location when they clicked on it in the dashboard. And they knew that they were actively tracking, and tracking was turned on because of the date timestamp. Really cool use of that last known location layer. You see the schema here too, right? So we have a rich set of attributes, including not just that timestamp, or the activity mode, but we'll capture altitude, we'll capture the course or heading information, the speed at which someone is moving, the accuracy both horizontal and vertically, the battery status, and there's much more. And we're looking to open up this schema even a little bit further as we move forward with Tracker. So lots of rich information that you can use to do all kinds of things with. Some very interesting analytics can be brought forward, and I'll show you that in my next slide, in fact. So the other aspect to Tracker overall is that Tracker is a part of the ArcGIS Python API. So you can see here, I'm just kind of scrolling through some of the capabilities. There's a GitHub repo. I'll show that in my very last slide, how to get to it. That includes some scripts and notebooks. This specific notebook that I'm scrolling through has a kind of a quick start guide that shows you how you can automate things like creating track views, perhaps from a CSV file, creating the custom roles that I just showed you with the view tracks privilege, auto-generating that QR code so you don't have to use a third-party QR code generator, doing some track analysis like creating track lines from the point features, generating a heat map, using aggregation for pattern detection, plotting the accuracy or battery life so you could do some interrogation of the devices that you own within your organization to see if one or more is suffering from battery issues. And incident detection. Incident detection is really cool. The example we have here in this with this Jupyter notebook is actually showing you points of where the, let's say the person being tracked was moving over the speed limit, or perhaps using change in rate of speed to determine where they accelerated quickly, where they decelerated quickly. There's a lot of really cool things you can do there. You could use dbScan to do point aggregation as well. A lot of interesting analytics can be done with this data. We even have an example with advanced track analytics. So you could look at visualizing deviance from a planned route. So if you generate a route, an optimized route for someone to travel, and you're tracking where they've gone, you can look at their deviance from that planned route and understand it a little bit better. So lots of capabilities through the Python API, lots of capabilities through using the analytics tools like geoanalytics within ArcGIS Enterprise to pull out interesting patterns and information about the data that you're capturing with Tracker. So what's next for us? We're closing in on a release. We're targeting March 24th right now. We've had a couple of customers ask us for Apple Watch support, being able to, with their phone in their pocket, turn to their watch to turn on and off tracking, be able to visualize the state of tracking inside of a complication on their watch. So we've added Apple Watch support for that. No, it's not a full-blown Apple Watch app in that it doesn't require a phone anymore. We still require that you run Tracker on your smartphone. We just added the capabilities to turn tracking on and off, see your schedule, see the complication on your watch. We've also added the ability for you to automatically generate a unique GUID inside of a field called the session ID. The session ID is a field that's used to manage additional information, let's just say about the track. We hadn't exposed it before. And what we're doing here is we're saying, when you flick the switch to turn on tracking, write a GUID value. So let's say I'm doing a pipeline right-of-way survey, and I want to have a unique identifier for when I start that survey that I could go then use to query out the tracks for that survey. When I get to the starting point of the survey, I can flick the switch to turn on tracking. It'll write that new GUID. All the tracks will have that grid value until I shut off tracking and then turn it back on. And when I turn it back on again, it's going to have a new GUID value. So that's all about the March 24th release. What's next after that? Being able to define a privacy geofence. So define kind of like a ghost mode, never track me in a certain area. Adding more capabilities to the MDM configuration, things like the ability to remote start and stop. That's been asked for a fair bit. We're looking at the ability to provide a check-in button inside of the application, so I can check in periodically through a feature service if I'd like. And then taking the concept of your identity and pushing it, location information into the profile. So here's an example of that. Day to day as a firefighter, I might be assigned an engine unit. And for the most part, that's what my job entails, is working on that engine. But it may so happen that during an event, my responsibility is to be a medic, and I could be actually traveling along on a bike. So what I'd like to be able to do is define a category for my role within that event and have that attached to my profile that moves around with me. So I can change that and it'll just reflect in the tracks that get created. That's what we're talking about with the location profile and what we're looking to add in a future release. Okay, so thank you very much for listening in on this session. Here's a few resources that you can look at. The product page has a number of success stories, talks about the high-level capabilities. Please share that with your management, share it with your friends and your family about all the cool things that Esri does with location tracking. Here's the doc website where you can get at resources that'll help you get started. We have a GeoNet community group. Since this is a virtual session that we're doing here, once this session's available, we'll post a blog article on the GeoNet group so that we can have that Q&A discussion off of the blog article, that piece that we sorely miss when we have to do this virtually. There's the link to the GitHub repo so that you can get at those wonderful analytical capabilities and take a look at what's possible. And we really want to hear what you want out of Tracker Next. So please reach out to us either through the GeoNet site or directly on the ArcGIS Idea site. We're trolling that site constantly, looking for what we should prioritize and build next. So thank you for your time today, and I hope the session was very informational for you.